John, I just want for viewers to understand why a founding father is no longer with the show. John came to me one day and he said, Joe, I love this show. And I love you and Mika and Willie. But I'm just going to tell you, I'm making way too much money. I can't stay here anymore. I gotta just, somebody has got to guide the Brinks truck back to the house when they dump the gold bullion in the garage every day. And so there's that, John. I
saw the way streaming was going to go. I predicted streaming. I said, you know what? Let me take my burden off of Comcast. Let them be a peacock and fly the way they need to fly, and I'm glad to see.
Okay. That's it.
It's very kind of you. So John, let's talk about this particular moment in time. It's an extraordinarily historic time, and the last 3-4 weeks just exhausting, I think, for everybody because the pace of news has been coming at us so quickly. I got a text from a historian, and it just had a number on it in the middle of all this. 1968. The pace is feeling like that. Can you sort of put it into words about where we are as a country?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and as you know, just finished, and this year just came out with a film called Shirley, which is about Shirley Chisholm. It stars the absolutely remarkable Regina King. And if you don't watch the movie for any other reason, certainly watch it for the history. But Regina is phenomenal. Shirley came on the scene in 1968, first black woman elected as a congressperson. She was a Democrat. 1972, which, Joe, this is where I would frame this election for any number of reasons. 1972, Shirley Chisholm runs for president of the United States, only been a congressman going into her second term. People thought she was crazy. But at the same time, 1972, first year that 18-year-olds could vote. So it was very much about young people, the way it is now, that young people feel like they don't have a voice, they don't have a chance, they can't get into the game. 1972, the election turned on an assassination attempt. George Wallace, running as a Democrat, if you can believe that, was actually winning most of the early primaries. In April, I believe it was in Maryland, was shot. Really changed the trajectory, allowed George Wallace to get into the race. But Shirley Chisholm actually went into the Democratic convention controlling almost 200 delegates. He needed 1,500 to be president. She wasn't going to get the nomination, but she really had the power to effect change at the convention. But it was the Democrats, particularly the men, and crazily enough, the Congressional Black Caucus, which she helped kick off, actually turned against her and blew up that coalition. So 52 years later, Joe, for me, when that drumbeat and the voices were getting more clear that Joe Biden, for the sake of the country, should probably step aside, my concern was that there would be some equivocation. And you heard individuals like Deval Patrick saying, hey, we got a deep bench. That's great, you got a deep bench, but you also got a player who's ready to get in the game. That's Vice President Harris. So for someone who just, spent 4 years looking at a similar run, a similar moment in history, as the individual you were talking about, 1968, again, I'd put it at 72, but 52 years ago, the Democrats now have a chance to do things differently, and they did. And you can feel the energy, you can see the conversations, and frankly, you can hear the fear, in my opinion, on the other side, because they don't know how to game this individual, not her record, not what she has done, not what she has accomplished, and not who she is. And can I say one other thing real quick, and then I want to turn it over. And this, to me, is the most incredible thing. And if there's nothing else that you take away from what I'm saying, please take this. We are being told this year, in this cycle, DEI is the boogie person, right? That is what is going to destroy America, having to sit down and learn how to conduct ourselves with other individuals. It has been reported that just 2 days ago, Congress, the Republican Congressional Caucus, had to sit down and have a DEI meeting and actually explain to their members how you interact, how you speak without being racist, sexist, misogynistic. So if DEI is so awful, why do the Republicans, and I'm going to use a little salty language, it's only 6 o'clock out here, why do grown-ass individuals have to be sat down and taught how to talk to other people like human beings? Of course, Donald says that he doesn't want to be nice anymore, so maybe it doesn't matter. Anyway, To me, it's 1972. It's Shirley Chisholm. It's all that. The difference is the Democrats are behind the vice president 1,000%.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mika, just I guess John should really know that, first of all, brilliant insights, but he should also know that a lot's changed since he's left. That's not salty language by, like, standards now and by what I say on the show.
Lowered the bar.
I've lowered the bar a lot. That's G-rated shit right there,
What the
John.
heck
Ridley.
are you guys talking about out
What
there?
the heck?
Come on.
What the heck?
Joe,
okay, I'm sorry. Let's raise the bar and go to Jonathan Lemire. Jonathan.
Certainly, Joe, what we saw last night was a moment of history with this president deciding to step aside. You could tell from his voice, you could tell from his words, he thinks he could still run again. He thinks he could still win again, but he bowed to reality and, in a remarkable moment, hands off power and eventually an office, which he has sought for most of his life. So, Ashley, with President Biden now focusing on governing, we now have a new race. It's Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. Give us your impressions, your reporting of this race in its early stages, how it's going to be shaped, including by issues like DEI, and how the Republicans are scrambling to adjust to suddenly facing Harris and not Biden.
So I'm so glad that John brought up Shirley Chisholm, because I've been thinking a lot about her too recently, including her striking quote, which, she had said that being black was a hindrance in politics. She had said that being a woman was a hindrance. But she said that she felt that her gender was more of an obstacle to overcome than her race. And so, now Kamala Harris, she is a black Indian American woman. And, I've been thinking about, and you cover this too, John, the way in which Donald Trump typically runs against women. And there's a couple case studies, right? There's Carly Fiorina in the 2016 primary. There's, of course, Hillary Clinton. There's Nikki Haley in the most recent primary. And on the one hand, it's worked out well for him in the sense that he's always prevailed. And on the other hand, it hasn't worked out so well for him in the sense that he has a history of racist, sexist, and misogynistic comments. And these are the sorts of things that alienate those suburban women voters, those independent voters, that small slice of voters in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania who will be pivotal for whichever candidate hopes to win the election. And I also think the playbook has changed a bit from 2016. And in talking to Democrats, there's a world in which they say Trump calling Hillary and Carly Fiorina these nicknames felt kind of novel, and these candidates didn't quite know how to respond. And the recommendation now is that with someone like Kamala Harris, it's 8 years later, and this is a post-Dobbs world. And so whatever he tries to throw at her, there's a sense among Democrats that, yes, she will have to reckon with sexism and racism in the country, but that she can also kind of dismiss what Trump is saying and say, look, it's not about me. It's about the women of America, the people of America who want to control their bodies in a post-Dobbs world, and just sort of turn those attacks back on Trump. And the hope from Democrats in the Harris campaign is that it backfires. As John said, when you have Republican House members having a meeting of how not to offend women and people of color, that's risky territory for Republicans.
Yeah. Ashley, you bring up such a great point. Donald Trump has always been the disruptor. He was the disruptor in 2016. You had 16 Republicans on the stage just looking baffled and confused. They didn't know how to approach him. Then you have him with Hillary Clinton during the debates, trying to be a disruptor, insulting her, doing things where, again, everybody's just sort of frozen in place. And it really went all the way through the 2020 election, where he amped up the disruption by talking about stolen elections. And then, of course, we saw where it all led on January the 6th. But, Ashley, you're so right. The world's changed. This is the same Elvis act that we saw in 2016. In 2016, it was new. It was shocking. It was drawing people in. And opponents didn't know how to approach it. But you're so right now. Kamala Harris can look back and say, OK, this is what he did to Hillary. This is what he did to Carly Fiorina. This is what he just did this year to Nikki Haley. This is what he's going to do to me. And you're so right. It's so easy for him to say, Donald, we've heard all this before. We heard you call so-and-so this. We've heard you insulting women now for a decade. It just is not what this campaign's about. I mean, talk about that, how the disruptor has been disrupted by this dramatic change in the Democratic Party.
Well, that's exactly right. And again, you're seeing some of those same attacks already, calling her laughing Kamala or cackling Kamala. And that's not to say that those don't have, sexist undertones or the mispronunciation of her name. But there's a sense, again, that the country has seen it before, and that Harris herself can, they hope, dismiss it with a little humor and make it about something broader, about real issues. And again, in a post-Dobbs world, that's quite easy for her. I will say, though, and I have a new piece out this morning getting at this, and who knows who Harris will choose as her running mate, but I was kind of struck by how quickly the conventional wisdom hardened to when you have a historic first on many levels at the top of the ticket, that she has to choose a white person, and by the way, basically a white guy. And again, that's not to say that she won't choose, say, a Gretchen Whitmer or a Wes Moore. But it was just interesting that for all of the progress that the nation likes to think it's made, that just Democrats, Republicans, just about everyone says, look, you need, quote unquote, balance, right? I had someone tell me, she can't be the DEI candidate. She can't have an all chick ticket, that some toxic masculinity would do well for her. The flip side, of course, is that Joe Biden very explicitly pledged, as an older white guy when he was running, to choose a woman. And then he ended up choosing a black woman, an Indian American woman. So there is an argument Democrats can make that diversity does matter, and it doesn't just mean adding a white person, a white man, to a black Indian American female ticket. But again, it has been striking with which, yes, the sense that Kamala Harris can come back on Trump for all of these attacks, but it sure would help if there was a reassuring white guy who looked like most of our past presidents to help her out.